We are talking offensive depth chart because camp is here. The season is around the corner. We got John Tweet Sport with us, and we're going to talk about who is going to be the starting lineup for your Georgia Bulldogs come game one, right here on Locked On Bulldogs.
You are Locked On Bulldogs, your daily podcast on the Georgia Bulldogs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Bulldogs podcast. I am Daniel. That is Clint. And John, welcome back to the podcast. It feels like family today. It feels like old times. This is what it's all about.
I'm just glad. Thanks for making time for me. You guys have blown up. You've reached the big time.
Come on now.
I appreciate just remembering the little people.
Come on now.
To the top.
That's silliness. We get way less mean comments when John is on the podcast. Take that for what you will. Take that for what you will. Look, we bring you out for the big guns, and we know we're getting close to the season, and so we know that that it's time to start getting serious. And so, thanks LinkedIn for being the sponsor of today's podcast, and we're going to jump into some offensive depth chart. We're going to talk about the defense tomorrow, so if you're interested in that, stay tuned. Go watch that episode, listen to that episode. As always, thanks for subscribing on YouTube or audio, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your audio. And leave us a rating and review and a comment on YouTube. All that's welcomed. So let's don't bury the lead anymore. We're going to jump into the depth chart. I don't know how much we'll get into backups, but we'll certainly talk about starters and then maybe just key contributors at every position. So who do we project to start? And then who are the guys behind that guy that you might want to keep an eye on, that you might want to watch out for? And so we'll obviously start with the quarterback position. It's Stetson Bennett. That's the starter. No big surprises there. John, thoughts on the quarterback position and the stability of the quarterback position going into year 17 for Stetson Bennett as a Georgia Bulldog?
Listen, I like where Georgia is at quarterback. I am a Stetson Bennett believer. I think if you look at the history of Todd Monken and his ability to coach players, particularly when you get into the third year of a system, which Stetson Bennett will be in his third year with Todd Monken. And if you look at what he's building off of, a full year in the system, a full year getting, for the majority of the year, getting reps with the ones. Now you have a full offseason where you get reps with the ones, where you come in as the guy. You have your strength and conditioning. I feel like Georgia is probably Georgia is in the best position at quarterback from a starting quarterback standpoint than they've been in the last 3 years since Drake Fromm went to the NFL. That's my feeling going into this year.
Yeah. I think we're both on that train and have been. I do think it's definitely Carson Beck. I think we're all in agreement there. If there is an issue, injury, or other with Stetson Bennett, I do think it's Carson Beck is first off the bench. And then I think, there's a chance you could see a little Brock Vandagriff sprinkle in there. Possibly. Oh, sure. It's not unheard of. It is against the grain of what Kirby typically you would think of him doing, but you might get a little Brock sprinkled in there. But yeah,
I'm going to call one shot right here, just very briefly.
Oh, I love it
already.
Don't sleep on Gunnar Stockton beating out Brock Vandagriff for that third QB spot.
Ooh.
Gunnar has certainly a ways to go in terms of, it's a complicated system. You're leading a team for the first time. If you're lining up under center or in the shotgun, it's Georgia mostly does. But this kid is looking very comfortable. It looks like his time in Athens as an early enrollee has been fruitful. and he's a super gifted athlete. So we're obviously talking about the third string of the depth chart from a quarterback standpoint, but don't sleep on it. I was not a Gunnar Stockton believer earlier this year. The more I hear from what's going on behind the scenes, I'm starting to believe.
100% well, completely with that.
Don't read the YouTube comments because Gunnar Stockton is trash because he didn't play anybody in high school, and so he's not a real quarterback. That's what you're going to learn from the educated folks down there.
Got it.
Just heads up, y'all. The factoid right there. Todd Monken, year 3 of a quarterback in an offense. Watch out.
Don't miss it.
All right, let's get into running backs. John, you know this about Clint and I. We do love Daijun Edwards, and we talked about him at length on the podcast. We like him a lot. Okay, we like him a lot. But Clint, I don't want to speak for you, but I think we both would say Kendall Milton is still number 1 on this depth chart. Is that right? Yeah.
That's correct. You've spoken well.
That is our take, John, is that it's Kendall Milton, and then it's a Kenny Mack, Daijun Edwards, probably. I'm going to go sandwich there at 2. I'm going to go T2, maybe. What are your thoughts on the running back depth chart and how it plays out?
Yeah, listen, I think this is Kendall Milton's year if he can stay healthy. I think it's his year to step into that Zamir White, Nick Chubb kind of role in this offense, right? I think Kenny McIntosh is a very, very talented back. We're also talking about, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, I know, as we get into the podcast, but the way that Georgia rotates skill players, when you're talking about starters, it's really a 1A, 1B kind of situation. I think it's going to be Kendall Milton, and then definitely for me would be Kenny McIntosh. I love Daijun Edwards, but I think what Kenny McIntosh gives you out of the backfield, catching the ball, I think what he gives you, kind of even lining up a little bit if you wanted to put him out in a slot position with some motion and do some trickeration like Monken does at times. I think that's a guy that has more talent in those areas. So, but I wouldn't sleep on Daijun Edwards. I also think, you have 2 true freshmen that in Andrew Paul. Remember Andrew Paul? This kid was like a 3-star that no one had ever heard of. And he's going to be real good.
All he's done since Camp John is what? What has he done in camp so far? Just impressed everybody.
Yeah, they referred to this behind the scenes as he's flashed. He's done nothing but flash. Kid is very gifted. And Branson Robinson. But I think it's Kendall Milton, Kenny McIntosh, and then Daijun Edwards. I hope Daijun Edwards I would love to see him play more of a DeAndre Swift type role in this offense as that third back that you had in, kind of that 2017 run.
I don't don't dispute that that's probably the order. And I'll just say on the podcast I like Kenny McIntosh catching the ball, but I'm at the point in my life where I'm ready to say I do not like Kenny McIntosh being handed the ball in the backfield. I just don't care for it. It's
totally fair.
It's just I haven't seen a lot of great things. And if you want to send me clips of some tape where he's doing a lot of great things being handed the ball, that's fine. I just don't see a lot of it out there. I think Daijun Edwards is the second best runner on this team, and I'd like him to get the second most carries on this team. Not snaps, but carries.
Doesn't he give you do you ever work done of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? Every single time he got the ball, you were like excited for him, but at the same time you're like, oh my gosh, -2 yards may be a very, very likely outcome of this. I can sense that's kind of what your feel and take on Kenny McIntosh is, Daniel.
Absolutely. He brings a lot of value to the team, and that's why I think he's going to get a ton of snaps. Okay? I think he's going to get a ton of snaps. But I don't know how many 2-back looks we're going to get this year. I don't know if we'll get to tight end, I think, on the depth chart momentarily, but it's crowded over there. And so I don't know how many 2-back. We've had a lot of 2-back for many years at Georgia. We've played a lot of multiple backs, okay? James Cook and Zamir White were basically on the field together the entire season at times last year. And so I don't know that you're going to get that much of that this year. There's plenty of slot receivers And so Kenny Mack, I think, is going to have to show that he can carry the ball to be valued as the number 2 back.
Here's what I'll say with the number 2 back, just real quickly. What Kirby Smart values in a running back is knowing pass protection. And one of the things I will say is whether he's a good blocker or not, Kenny McIntosh does know where to be in pass protection in those situations. And so I think that's something that, Dajan Edwards hasn't been in the game enough in passing situations. And so I agree with you, Daniel. I think from a carries perspective, would love to see him get the second most carries, on run downs and run situations. I think Kenny McIntosh and Kendall Milton just seem to know the pass protections, and it's just a big deal.
Right.
And that's why. And I think Dajan, if he continues to progress as a pass blocker, as a pass protector, you can see him move up. But that's been the one thing that I feel like has been missing for him, and probably no fault of his own, right? It's just hard to learn that when you're not getting reps in that first or second or even third or fourth.
And again,
order.
see previous statement about Todd Monken and the third year. Every single year at UGA, the passing attempts is like this, y'all. And so with that taking place, running backs need to be in positions to protect that extra blitzer that they're going to bring, because they're not going to be able to cover all of our receiving options this coming year, which we'll get to right after this. But first, I'm going to let you all know about LinkedIn. LinkedIn, Daniel, have you heard of LinkedIn before?
Remind me, because it sounds familiar.
Okay, I'll remind you. John, we already know John is like the CEO of LinkedIn. We don't have any proof for this, but I don't have proof that it's not the case. Right now, LinkedIn is the place to go for everything you need to hire the best performing employees that you can find, right people for your team, small businesses firing on all cylinders. LinkedIn Jobs is here to make it easier to find people that you need to talk to faster and for free. Create a job post in minutes with LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond of over 810 million people, just shy of the amount of runs the Braves gave up to the Mets this weekend. Sorry, I'm pissed. Then add your jobs on the purple hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn number 1. LinkedIn Jobs help you find the candidates you need to talk to faster. Did you know every week nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free. LinkedIn.com/LockedOnCollege. That's LinkedIn.com/LockedOnCollege. Terms and conditions apply.
Number 1, how dare you?
I know. I'm sorry.
We're trying to have a good Christian podcast over here, and you're just out here. Nope.
I'll pray for you. It's fine. I'll pray for you.
Thank you.
Number 2, you're talking about John Tweet Sports over here being the CEO of LinkedIn. Meanwhile, it's executive producer intern M-Dubs that's out here tweeting pictures of himself on a yacht. He just spent 9 months in Mexico or something. I don't know what this man's doing, but he out here just living a life.
Listen, executive intern producer M-Dubs, I'll just tell you, this man has not been at work in 2 weeks. So he's been traveling the world. It may be 3. It may be pushing 3. So
you haven't seen him in 3 weeks. We haven't seen him in 9 months.
You said he hadn't been at work in 3 weeks. You must mean a different job, because he hadn't shown up to this job in quite some time.
Oh, I mean any job. Period.
We got all right. We got to talk about pass catchers, and we're going to do all the pass catchers in the second segment of this podcast. All right. So just look, we're going to keep this one short and sweet. Okay. The tight end room. There is no depth chart. There is just depth. It is just people on top of people. Brock Bowers, Darnell Washington, Eric Gilbert. Do you see the need, John, to differentiate between those 3 guys in some way, or are we comfortable saying those 3 tight ends are about to go out here and eat?
Those 3 tight ends are going to go out here and eat. And by eat, I mean the only differentiation you have is I think Darnell and Brock Bowers are better blockers. So they'll probably be, if you're running 12 personnel and run situations, that's probably who you're going to have in. Eric Gilbert is going to be a guy, and Brock Bowers as well, that you can line up in the slot. Darnell Washington can probably do that too. I don't know how much of that we'll see from him, but these are all slight variations, right? You're essentially looking at a 3-headed monster. And that's also why I'm a big proponent of, it used to be run the damn ball was kind of the the mantra at Georgia. My mantra for the 2022 season is
say it.
Run the damn 13 personnel.
Yep.
Just put all 3 of them out there. Just give me 13.
And just for
give me
all
13.
the listeners that were like mocking us, like, oh, there's no chance they put 3 tight ends at the same time. Bet me right now. Bet me right now.
13 personnel.
Listen, you may see a 14 personnel this year. You may see a 14 personnel.
I'll tell you somebody that's going to be hard to keep off the field.
Say
a young man named Oscar Delp.
That was my next question to you. So now, now you got the 3-headed monster. You got just the freaking Cerberus over here defending Georgia's offense. Is number 4 one of the 2 forgotten about tight ends, Ryland Goad and Brett Seether, or is number 4 on the depth chart in your mind the young freshman Oscar Delp?
I think right now it's Oscar Delp, and the reason I would say that is because Ryland Goad, and I know Brett Seether is banged up as we currently speak in fall camp. I'm not even sure how much work he's been able to get in at fall camp. Ryland has been battling knee issues for a long time. It seems like, the last year at least. And so for me, again, when health is not an issue, when guys are getting all the reps that they need to get, then this tight end room goes as deep as you want to go. But when I look at those 2 guys who again are super talented, it's hard to get past Brock Bowers and Darnell Washington and now Eric Gilbert. But Brett Seethers and Ryland Goad are super talented guys. One of those guys could potentially play that John Fitzpatrick type role in this offense. But I just think personally, from just watching highlights, from hearing things coming out of camp, I think it's Eric Gilbert, Brock Bowers, Darnell Washington, and Oscar Delp. I think that's who you're going to see.
Yep. Oscar Delp's catching touchdown passes this year, y'all. He will catch
touchdown
passes.
He might run a couple of touchdown passes.
No, again,
just watch out.
Because he is a clone of Brock Bowers, and Brock Bowers burst on the scene last year for 13 tuds. Yeah. So I know Brock is still there, and I know all, but you can't keep that kind of talent off the field.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about receivers, John. Let's talk about the X and the Z receivers. Okay, so the two whatever you want to call them, the 2 sideline receivers, not the slot
receivers.
Yeah. Number 1, who you got starting at each of these positions, and number 2, how do you necessarily, when you think about this Georgia offense, do you differentiate between these 2 positions, or do you view them mostly as similar?
I differentiate them. I differentiate the outside receivers from the slot receivers simply because Georgia can line up a slot. You can line up a tight end in the slot, right? But I think for me, I don't differentiate in terms of what an outside receivers are asked to do. Yeah, I think you've got to be able to do all the things that an outside receiver has to do. I don't think Georgia lines up a guy at X, for example, and you're just running go-calls, and then the guy at Z is, running more complicated routes.
Right. So who you got at each of these 2 positions?
I've got A.D. Mitchell. And I'm gonna go out on a limb and put Ladd McConkey as an outside receiver, not a guy in the slot. I think Ladd McConkey is going to surprise some folks on the outside, lining up way out there and making some guys look silly. Those are the 2 that I would have for those positions to start.
Clint,
this group is going to go deep too, though.
What's your take on that? What's your take on Ladd out of the slot into the boundary a little bit?
My take is this. Ladd McConkey may be second on this team in touchdown pass catches this year. If you gave me juice on that instead of A.D. Mitchell, Brock Bowers is going to be number 1. I suspect, again, he'll repeat as that. But if you were looking at Ladd McConkey, and you're looking at, again, what Kirby values really, really high in wide receivers, ability to block, know the scheme, and get open, route running. Okay? This is very, very key. Ladd can do all that. He is twitchy off the line of scrimmage. He gets behind defenses, and he's stayed healthy. These are key factors that other wide receivers are. So if you were to give me some juice that Ladd McConkey, if you were to tell me at the end of the season, Ladd McConkey is the leading outside receiver in touchdowns, I'm not going to be shocked by that.
Yeah, I was watching the Clemson game. You guys remember the Clemson game last year?
I remember.
It's a good time. Good time was had by all. And listen, I know we were thin at wide receiver in that game. There was some questions about, like we had some guys. Kieris was out. We had some guys that were out for that game. Obviously, George was out. But you look at the targets that obviously Brock Bowers burst on the scene. Brock Bowers got the ball thrown at him. JT Daniels couldn't keep his eyes off Brock Bowers in that game. But you look at the targets that Ladd McConkey got in that game. JT overthrew him on a touchdown that would have been an absolute beauty. He was up there and he was ready to catch the ball. Ladd McConkey, even first game out of the gate as a true freshman, there's something about this kid. Now, he certainly looks like a slot receiver. But, John, I don't hate the idea because you're not going to see a ton of slot receivers. And you just can't. There's not enough people.
The issue is you're going to line up a tight end in the slot probably as much 70, or more than you
80% of the time.
A wide receiver there. Yes, absolutely. So Ladd is a guy that you just can't keep off the field. And when I go down and look at what this offense is potentially going to do based on what we saw last year, and hopefully building on that, is man, I just think he's twitchy is the right word. He's not a burner, right? He's not a Jameson Williams guy that's just going to outrun everybody. But he can get you out of position as a defensive back very early in the route, and then he's by you, and then good luck.
He go. 3 more names that I'll get your gentleman's take on quickly, and that is Rosemy, Jack Saint, Morissette, and Jackson Meeks. I think you're going to see some Jackson Meeks in this. I'm going to slip him in there. I know the other 2 are probably names more at the tip of people's tongue when they think about these outside receivers. But what are your thoughts on those 3 fellas, and who's going to be coming in next in terms of depth?
Yeah, my thoughts are you can take all 3 of those, and in that second line on the depth chart, you can put all 3 of them. But if I had to put them in order, I would put Marcus Rosemy, Jackson. I would put Denylon Morissette and Jackson Meeks probably 3A, 3B. But I agree with you. Jackson Meeks, I think, is Kirby Smart doesn't talk about a lot of players specifically when he gets up in these press conferences, and he has mentioned Jackson Meeks' name last year, especially a couple times.
Yep.
And that's like, to me, I think he doesn't, Kirby, he doesn't waste words. He says a lot of things that that's a lot of coach speak, but he doesn't waste words when he's naming players and talking about them specifically. And you've heard Jackson Meeks' name out of his mouth a couple times over the last year. And I think that kid he's going to push for playing time for sure.
That's Kirby's 101. You got to pay attention. Clint, very quickly, and then John's going to tell you probably why you're wrong. Who you got as your number 1 in the slot? Number 1 in the slot, who's it going to be? You got really 2 choices, but I'm going to make you choose one of those 2.
If we're not talking Eric Gilbert and Brock Bowers.
Yes, I'm talking about slot receivers. I'm talking about slot receivers.
Right,
Thank you.
All right. My personal number 1 would be Dom Blaylock back fully healthy. That would be my personal number 1. I think it's going to be Kieris Jackson is going to be the slot out there. But if it was up to me, if I was doing the depth chart, give me Dom all day long.
Wow. John?
Yeah, that's fair. I'll tell you that you're wrong because Kieris Jackson, he tweeted. So Kieris Jackson was put on the preseason All-SEC team, first team.
People love old people. People just love.
Wait, he was put on this preseason All-SEC team as a return specialist, not as a wide receiver.
Ooh.
And he tweeted, Kieris Jackson, he said, about time to put some respect on me as a receiver. And when he tweeted that, I thought, all right. And he's been on there's been a couple of interviews where Kieris Jackson has basically said, I am out to prove that I am an elite receiver on this football team. And so with that being said, with him being where he is, that it's hard to bet against. It's hard to bet against that kid. So we'll see.
Yeah.
Love Don Blaylock. If Don Blaylock can stay healthy, the sky's the limit for him as well. But I just think Kyrus has some swagger coming in this year.
Let me just remind everyone here before we're gonna shift to offensive line in segment 3. Let me remind everyone there are not enough footballs for all of the people that you think are going to have breakout years this year to have breakout years. There are just not. If it doesn't mean they're bad at football, and it doesn't mean we hate them, but not everyone's going to have a breakout year because there just aren't enough. We haven't even mentioned Arian Smith's name yet. I don't know. Like, we're not even out here talking about the fastest, biggest deep ball threat on the roster. And so there's just not enough for everybody to – it'll be interesting. Let's get to the big guys, and we will do that when we come back right after we tell you about the fine folks over at BetOnline. BetOnline is your online sportsbook expert. They are the place that you go if you want to place a wager on sports. BetOnline, the official sportsbook partner of the Locked On Bulldogs podcast, and the only place Clint and I trust to do all of our online wagering. Listen, season win totals are out. Championship futures are out. Week 0 games are out. There's spreads on week 1 out. Jump on some of these lines over at BetOnline. Make your deposit now. Get ready for the season. When you do, enter the promo code LOCKEDON. They're going to give you a bonus on your initial deposit, free money with which to wager all season. You wager it, you win, you cash out, you have more money in your bank account. It's just that simple at betonline.net, your online sportsbook experts.
Offensive line coming up next. I think we have a pretty good idea of what this offensive line is going to be. However, let's run down the guys that we've talked about getting the absolute anchors. Warren McClendon on the right side. And then we got a guy coming in who showed out in the Natty in limited, but very important time. That was
very
crucial.
Important duty.
You cannot overstate how important that duty was.
Yeah, I mean, Will Anderson, I've been told the best football player on the earth.
I heard he was pretty good.
Yeah.
And I watched the name that Clint is about to mention just push him right down.
Yeah.
Just let him go with the flow.
Broderick just decided to say, I'm the captain now.
I'm your party captain. Broderick Jones and Warren McClendon, they've got those tackle spots on lockdown. I feel better, as Clint said. Clint said this might be the best 2 tackles Georgia's had in the recent future. I'll tell you this, going into the season, I haven't felt better at tackle for Georgia in a long time. They may not turn out to be as good as Isaiah Wilson and Andrew Thomas, but going into the season, I feel better about this tackle situation than I've felt in a long time. Broderick Jones and who Clint and I believe, John, is going to be a first-round draft pick, Warren McClendon. I think he's going to play his way right into the first round this year. Those are 2 elite tackles.
Yeah, and behind either one of those guys, you got Amarius Mims, who came back, put his head down, who is an absolute freak. He
transferred out. I don't know if you knew that, John. He left the program. He was gone. Kirby, there's a problem. There's a culture problem at Georgia. There's a big culture problem.
Kirby had lost control of the program.
That's accurate. So Amarius Mims is gone. He's transferred out. No, wait, he came back. He went to Gainesville, Florida, and was like, I'm sorry, no, I want to come back. Can I come back, please? Yes. Okay. Let's talk about, and then Cedric Van Pran, this man has locked up the center position. You want to talk about starting every game for a national championship winning team last year. You want to talk about an anchor of an offensive line. Georgia doesn't have any returning talent, and yet the entire offensive line comes storming back, led by, I think, this guy, really an anchor in the middle. Feel really good about him. Any thoughts on who the second center would be in a pinch, John, or is this too deep in the weeds?
No, I'll give you real quick. It's going to be the guy that was the second center last year.
Warren Erickson.
Yep. He's the second everything on the team.
Erickson.
He's literally he's the backup to every position.
He is. Warren Erickson, who is a really good football player. was starting center and then went to guard and became the backup center. And I think he slides right into that backup center position this year.
All right, so let's talk about guards because Kirby he's losing sleep over the guards is what he would have you believe. He is absolutely he's sick about it. He cannot even stomach the fact that there are only 7 returning guards who have game experience on this team. I'm not sure if you count them up.
I heard Kirby get asked about this last week. You guys talked about it on the show on Friday.
Yes, sir. He did. Yeah. So he's freaking out about the guards. Are you freaking out about the guards? And who do we think is going to get those 2 spots? Because there's really a lot of names here for us to sift through.
A lot of names. I'll tell you who has been taking reps at practice from all. You can read all the reports online. Yeah. At right guard is big old number 69 Tate Ratledge, flowing mullet and all. Who was a starter at guard last year
for the national championship team in the first game of the season?
In the first game of the season, this kid came in and beat everybody out. He beat out a lot of names that we're going to mention right here in a second. Beat them out last year, and now he's back. If he can fully rehab to 100%, I think he's going to lock down that right guard position. I think he's the prototypical right guard, and between him, Van Pran, Tate, and Warren McClendon, that right side is going to be real good.
And Big O.
Real good.
And Big O right next to him. I don't care. You give it to Kenny McIntosh all you want. It doesn't matter. Just run him to the right. Run to the right, young man. Just go.
Good luck on that side. No, I think Tate Ratledge is a guy that you got to throw in there. And then I think, you have to look at – we've talked a lot, right, about a guy like Xavier Truss, who his name has come up a ton. He played and didn't play well against Cincinnati in that Peach Bowl, but he's a guy that's been there. You got a guy named Dylan Fairchild that is in that mix. These are all, when I look at right guard, these are guys that come to mind for that position. I'm separating right guard and left guard because they are two, to me, very distinct positions. But on that side, those are some names that I'm throwing in there for the right guard. What about you guys?
Yeah, I like Tate Ratledge. I think if he's healthy, he's the guy. He is the guy. I think he's the best guard on the team. He was the best guard on the team last year. And I think the coaching staff knew that. And so it's all going to be about health.
Yes.
He is less than 12 months away from a major lower body injury. And so you just do not know how things are going to proceed. I would not be surprised at all if he does not start the season against Oregon out there on the field, if he is not yet ready to go. But at some point along the way, Tate Ratledge is coming back, and Tate Ratledge will insert himself into that lineup. When you think about left guard, I don't know. Is it as simple as saying Warren Erickson's the next best football player on the team, and so we'll put him at left guard? Is it that simple?
It's never that simple with Kirby Smart, right? Like, I mean, are you guys kidding? No, it's not that simple. Come on. I think it's going to be like, I think on that left side, there are guys that have been in the system for a little while, for a couple years, that I think if Warren Erickson is going to be that guy, he's going to have to beat out a couple of those guys that have been in the system for a couple years. And
you're
those
talking
guys,
about like Devin Willock of the world.
Devin Willock and Micah Morris are the two that I would say right away are guys that have been in the system for a couple years that are true guards. Devin Willock is the one that his name keeps coming up again online. Y'all can go read it. This guy is 6'7", 335 pounds.
No, he's big. He's quite big.
He's a mountain on that side, and he's been in this system since his class of 2020, I think. So he's been in this system for a couple years now. For me, I think it's not going to be Warren Erickson if you have one of these younger guards that can play. And Kirby, they've gone out and recruited 4- and 5-star guards, right? Like, you got guys on the team that can play. So for me, I think Devin Willock is a name that keeps coming up. Micah Morris, again, I'll throw out Dylan Fairchild. I think there's a few names that keep coming up that could play on that side too.
Yeah, to me, I just think the fact that there was a coaching change at offensive line, right? I think that's the only chance that Xavier Truss has of seeing this field. Like that's it. Because in the old staff, I think Xavier Truss had used up all the strikes. Like I think they put him in and he blew an assignment and he whiffed and he false started and he held somebody. Yep. You saw Xavier Truss getting yelled at on the sidelines more last year than you did virtually any player on the team. And so it doesn't instill a lot of confidence in you, but he obviously has the physical tools that, like, if he could get it together, I mean, what an animal that could be on the offensive line. But, Devin Willock, similar-sized guy, and so maybe it's his opportunity.
Here's the one thing I'll say that people won't like when I say this about a guy named like Warren Erickson.
Oh, here we go.
Do you know how many? Do you remember a guy named Solomon Kinley that played guard at Georgia?
I remember. Love him.
Okay. Warren Erickson played more snaps at guard last year than Solomon Kinley did in his senior year when he went, wherever he went in the draft, like really high in the draft. The guy has played a ton at the position, and so
this coaching staff loves Warren Erickson. That's why I say, is it just as simple as just slot him in?
It's not that simple, and I think your coaching change situation is a big reason why it's not that simple. But that being said, if one of these other guys if they don't figure it out, I do think Kirby will go tap Stacey Searles on the shoulder and be like, "Put Warren in there."
We're done
because he's been there. Hasn't played the best at times, but man, we could see one of those two. To your point, I agree about Truss, though. I think, and I also agree that on the flip side, I think some of these other guys that haven't got a chance with Stacey Searles' new coaching staff, I think that gives them an opportunity.
All right. Well, a 700-minute podcast today, breaking down the offensive depth chart. We'll be back tomorrow.
Let's do it again.
Let's run it back. Let's do it again. We'll talk about the defensive side of the ball. There are no position battles up in the air on the defensive side of the ball, so it should just go quick. I mean, it should be very
We don't have
quick.
anybody to replace. It's the same people.
All the same people. All right. John, he'll be back tomorrow. Clint and I will be back as well. Join us on the Locked On Bulldogs podcast, and we'll see you guys then.
See you.